This podcast contains content related to child exploitation and criminal investigations. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The views expressed are those of the host and do not represent any official agency. All individuals discussed are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Every time an arrest hits the news, I see the same words in the comments. Monster. Evil. Lock them up and throw away the key. Feed them to the wood chipper. And trust me, I completely understand the emotion behind that. But here's the problem. If we only see predators as monsters, we never really learn how they operate. We just fear them. And if we don't understand how they think, we can't recognize them early. Because the most dangerous predators are not the ones who look scary. They're not what you imagine hiding under your bed or in your closet. They're the ones that look normal. The coach, the neighbor, the coworker, or even the parent in the carpool line. In my career, I've sat across from hundreds of offenders, and what I've learned is this. Predators are not driven by impulse alone. They're driven by psychology. And once you understand that psychology, their behavior becomes disturbingly predictable. I'm Sean Lacy, and this is Chasing Shadows. Today we're going inside the mind of an online predator. Not to excuse their crimes, but to expose how they think, operate, and hide in plain sight. Now, over the last several episodes, we've talked about systems. We talked about how grooming works, how kids are pulled into exploitation networks. But underneath every system is a person. A parent often asks me, what kind of person does this? What kind of sicko preys on kids? And the answer is more unsettling than people expect. Because most online predators don't see themselves as villains. They see themselves as justified. And that mindset is what makes them even more dangerous. The biggest myth is that predators are visibly broken. They look unstable. That they can't function in society. When we post the pictures during press releases, everyone is quick to comment, "Oh yeah, he looks like one of them." But the reality is most offenders that I've arrested have jobs, have families, have children, have friends, have reputations. Some were coaches at a high school. Some were IT professionals that were respected in their field. Some were married officers, but most were married with children. Predators don't live in some dark area outside society. They live inside of it. They walk among us. They work with us. They sit next to us at our kids' gymnastics practice. And that is not by accident. It's part of how they survive. Most people assume predators act out of some uncontrollable sexual impulse. But that's wrong. Most are not impulsive. In fact, very few are. They're methodical. They plan. They rehearse. They study. They adapt. Most predators don't just want sex. They want control. They want power and access, secrecy. The sexual behavior is just the outcome, but that's not the engine that drives them. Nearly every offender develops a narrative to excuse their behavior. Common justifications that I've heard are, well, they're mature for their age, or they wanted it. I never forced them. They came on to me. I was just helping them explore. It was just online. I think they realized it was a fantasy. I didn't know they were a child, even though they told me over and over and over again. Or I was just trying to keep them safe. These are not random excuses, even though they are common. They're psychological shields. Predators must neutralize their guilt to function. They don't wake up thinking that they're evil. They wake up thinking that they're just misunderstood. Many predators have to live double lives. In public, their identity is responsible and reliable and respected. Their private identity is anonymous, powerful, and untouchable. Online spaces allow them to construct a fantasy world where they control the narrative and they choose the rules and they dominate emotionally. And this is why online exploitation is so attractive to them. It offers power without physical risks. The likelihood of them getting caught or reported is minimal. But why don't they go after adults? Why do they struggle in their relationships? Well, children offer what those adults cannot. Children offer naivety, validation. They offer forgiveness because their world travels so quickly. They offer access, but above all else, they offer silence. Children, by their very nature, are easier to manipulate. They're easier to isolate. They're easier to convince that something is normal. Predators don't choose children by accident. They choose them because they're easier to control. Predators rarely jump straight into extreme behavior. I've seen it, but it's rare. They escalate gradually. From fantasy to chat. From chat to images. From images to sexual videos. They use those videos to then gain control, and that control leads to coercion. Each simple step becomes a psychological investment. And by the time the crimes are discovered, sometimes these offenders have been active for years. Another myth is once they're caught, they're cured. But sexual offending is not situational for most offenders. If you remember my traveler from Pennsylvania, this was the second time that he had been caught in the same type of operation. I interviewed another offender. When I asked him how I could get him to stop, he said, "You have to delete the internet." That's not situational, that's behavioral. Without early intervention or accountability, many escalate. That's why the patterns that we're seeing repeat. It's not because they're careless. It's because nothing is being done to change the underlying psychology. And how do predators blend in? Well, they survive by looking normal. The manual that we talked about in episode 1 told them what to do. It told them to volunteer. It told them to coach. It told them to mentor and join communities. It explicitly said that these roles give them access and credibility. They don't hide from society. They don't lurk in the shadows or peer underneath the bleachers. They embed themselves in society. This is why profiling just by appearance often fails. It's easy to look at the picture with the headline above describing them as a child predator and say, yes, I would have picked him out immediately. But that's easily done when we tell you who he is. We have to understand that the behavior is more important than how we see them. So, parents always ask me, how do I spot one? If I can't look at them and tell, how do I spot them? Well, that's where you have to look at the patterns. You have to look at who has access and is given excessive attention to your children. You have to be able to identify when the boundaries are being blurred. You have to be able to recognize when your child is keeping secrets and that secrecy is encouraged. Is there a specific adult in their lives that is using isolation as a tactic? All of these things are our responsibility to try to spot, because understanding predator psychology helps us see the actual behavior and not just rely on the stereotypes. So what does that mean for us as parents? When the most dangerous predators are not the obvious ones. We have to understand that they're the patient ones. They're the helpful ones. They're the trusted ones. Because protection comes from awareness and not fear. We can't just see them as monsters because the predators don't see themselves as monsters. Remember, they see themselves as justified. They don't think that they're doing anything wrong. And when we catch them, they tell us the same. Interview after interview, it's the same script. And that's exactly why they're dangerous. Because if we just blindly reduce them to villains, we will just miss all of the warning signs. But if we understand how they think, we gain the power. Because the more clearly we see the psychology, the harder it becomes for them to hide. As parents, we have to trust our gut. If something doesn't feel right, even if it may look right, when those little hairs on the back of your neck stand up or your stomach turns when you see an interaction, don't push that aside. Don't ignore that feeling. That's a perfect opportunity to have a conversation with your kid. We have to have these conversations with our children often and early. It's a team effort. We are responsible for their safety, but through education, they can help us out. If you see something, report it. Contact your local law enforcement. Ask questions. Contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and file a report. Take those opportunities to start those conversations with your parents in your community and ask those questions and start the conversation with your children. It's a lot easier to fight these guys when we do it together. Because understanding the mind of the predator is one more way that we take back the light. I'm Sean Lacy, and this is Chasing Shadows. Thank you for listening, and thank you for standing with me in this fight.